Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. I'm your host Sean Hussey, joined alongside me by my brother Daniel. Daniel, how are you getting on?
Not too bad, Sean. How's things?
Yeah, all good. It was another one of those busy sport and summer weekends, a lot of GA action. Obviously, the Olympics have started over the last couple of days, but I suppose we'll start with GA and we'll start with Gaelic football. And I think a lot of people were very fascinated to see the two provincial finals at the weekend, but I think a lot of people would be fascinated to see that in a few bookmakers they have Kerry as favourites for the All Ireland after the weekend. Is that warranted?
Yeah, it probably is based on. I mean, it's incredible we're here to start with. That Kerry are favourites over Dublin. Like Jesus, you'd have got some odds on that. Excuse the slight pun in there, but like Kerry have been sensational, and like watching the game against Cork, it was actually mind-blogging that first quarter. What was going on? Like I know Kerry missed a couple of goal chances, but Cork seemed to get everything right. Brian Hurley was causing major problems for Cork. So if you told me then that Kerry are going to turn this around and win by 22 points, like it's an absolute incredible turnaround. The score was 1-5 to 4 points going into the first water break, and they ended up losing by 22 points. It's absolutely incredible comeback. Like the Kerry firepower that they have means that no matter how leaky their defense is, they still have the likes of Paulie Clifford, David Clifford, Sean O'Shea, Gainey. And the fact that David Clifford was left scoreless from play pretty much shows you the firepower that Kerry have. But yeah, I would have them ever so. I'd have it like a coin flip if they were playing Dublin right now. The chances are they'll play each other in the final. I do think there'll be two good All Ireland semi-finals, particularly if Tyrone beat Monaghan, and it'll be Kerry, Tyrone, Dublin, Mayo. I would love to see Monaghan beat Tyrone now and get us a new team in the All Ireland semi-final. To be honest with you, but the Kerry Tyrone, like Kerry don't lose. Like I was watching the game with Dad, Sean, and he was saying, well, Kerry hate Tyrone, you know what I mean, and you get all that sort of build up in GA, which you don't get in other sports, like the team and the bogey team. It's overplayed a lot in GA, but it definitely is something there. So yeah, I would probably have them, slightly favourites. Like it's amazing. I can't believe I'm saying that, but they've just been absolutely incredible, and they can blow teams out of the water no matter who you are. And like Dublin will attack Kerry, which could probably lead to their own downfall, so it's an exciting championship in the sense we have a team to take on Dublin. Whether we'll have a good game before the All Ireland final, who knows? I'd probably be, I'd be hopeful more than expectations. But like Mayo were great today, but good yesterday. But Kerry, yeah, they look decent. Like they were just, it was pretty impressive. Now I have to say. You're on mute there, Sean, I think.
Sorry, considering last year and the semi-final loss and everyone talked about hurt, would you believe that was Kerry's biggest championship win by margin over Cork, which is which is a bizarre stat considering last year and considering probably the start of the game.
Yeah, that's incredible stat. Yeah, I actually hadn't heard that. Yeah, that's amazing. Like as I said, 1-5 to 4. Cork had done everything right. And I would say one thing about Cork, and they were getting a hard time, for the golfing class, which is obviously true. But like they had to go, and I'd rather a team go out like that and really look like, they had to go. And I wouldn't begrudge them that. And I think because they had that go and they were 1-5 to 4 points up was the reason they fell apart in the end. But you sense the Kerry rootlessness. Damien Lawler, the pitchside reporter at the water break, said Peter Keane is going mad here, saying this is, we need to score here, goals, points, let's keep the scoreboard ticking over. They were obviously fuming from last year's and what happened. And I think I made a throwaway comment saying something along the lines of that they could have easily won last year's All Ireland if it wasn't for that. And, looking at how things are panning out now, it's an easy thing to say, but it's probably, they definitely given Dublin a bit better game than Mayo, like in my opinion. So the fact is they were fuming after that and they really owed one to Cork. But I don't think I've ever seen a team be so ruthless. Like the Cork would still attack in that last quarter. They'd wait, patient, no fouls, get the ball, 3 kicks later. David, even the last score, the time was up. It was like 73-55. And Davy Clifford swinging the ball into Tommy Walsh, I think, he pops it over with his left foot. And I know the game's over, but the ruthlessness to make sure that they owed one to Cork. Now, that's no good to you. That's not going to beat Dublin in an All-Ireland final in the last couple of minutes. But I think for Kerry lads, if anything, they wanted that, and it was pretty amazing and impressive to see. I know Dublin have always done that, but I just sense that Kerry really, really wanted, because I don't think that Cork side is a particularly bad side. Like I don't think you're going to get a better inside forward. Best years might be behind him, but Brian Hurley was sensational. And and they were unfortunate that Mial Martin had to go off with an injury at halftime. Even though a lot of people we thought he was coming off because he was dropped, but yeah, it's amazing how that's turned around at 22 victory. They definitely avenged last year's semi-final defeat, and they won't get caught like that again. And it'll be very interesting who they come up against, Tyrone and Monaghan. I can't wait for that game. It should be a good game, but I'd expect Kerry to come through by 6 or 7 points, and we'll have a cracking All-Ireland final,
Yeah, and I think the key is, after you just mentioned what Peter Keane was saying, have I heard that Kerry scored 3 goals and 3 points in the third quarter, and Cork didn't get a score in that time. So there was obviously something said at half time where there was an emphasis put on it. And I think with Kerry, I think they've been kind of going about their business for a few years. Obviously, we heard about this success on minor level. Peter Keane and of course himself at the helm, the likes of Shawnee O'Shea, David Clifford. And it does feel like they're slowly coming away. And sometimes things happen at the stage for a team to be at a stage where they go on to win things. You look at Dublin, the semi-final loss in 2010, getting hammered by Kerry in 2009, the Meath Leinster semi-final as well, and you think of that Kerry match to Cork last year, which was just a pure shock, that might almost spur them on. Do you think they are going about shoring up their defence slowly but surely? I mean, there's a lot of changing in personnel over the last couple of years, but do you think Peter Keane's trying to find a way about bringing more solidity there?
Well, he was last year. That's why they got caught against Cork. They were trying to come up with this defensive system because they knew, if a one-on-one, these Kerry backs, you saw what Brian Hurley can do. Imagine some of the Dublin forwards at their peaks, particularly last year, would have done. So he was looking for that defensive system, and he realised that the best way, the only way really Kerry can beat Dublin is by attacking them. Is this ball maybe? I think they have Tommy Walsh there. They should throw him in and start against Dublin. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with the Kerry Dublin, but I think Tommy Walsh gives you an avenue. Kerry went about it in the All-Ireland replay of 19 with the high balls, and it just didn't work. But it didn't work because the ball they were hitting into Paul Gainey was brutal. And secondly, it's Paul Gainey, and who would you rather on a high ball, Tommy Walsh or Paul Gainey? Now, I know why they did it. They want Tommy Walsh to come on in that last 10, 15 minutes, but Fitty McMahon came on, and it just kind of cancels that out. Whereas, I think if Kerry against a Dublin, I wouldn't expect this against Tyrone, but I really think against Dublin they should try something like that. So I don't think he's too fussed about the defence, which is why Cork had so many chances, because there's so many one-on-ones. Now, whether against Dublin they might try and get someone back there, like a +1 or something, who knows? But it seems like I think he's just going to have to trust his defenders in a one-on-one battle. I do have flashbacks to Armagh 2 weeks ago. That could happen against the Dubs, against Kerry, but they might have a couple of plans in place, whether you bring someone back if there's a goal or whatever, and you kind of share it up for 5 minutes, whereas Armagh were just man on man. That's the danger of man on man, but I think they just got to trust the personnel they have. There's been a lot of personnel change in there. It'd be hard to know who starts at the back, but I think they've got to trust the likes of, Paddy Vaughan, David Clifford, Sean O'Shea and Paul Gainey to get the scores up front and try and outscore Dublin, because pound for pound, that Dublin forward line, that Kerry forward line, you probably marginally go Kerry, and that's where they have Dublin. That's where they're most stronger, and Dublin will always have better defenders than Kerry, so I think they've got to try and outscore Dublin. Not too dissimilar how they went about certain parts of that All-Ireland finals, and that's the kind of template there, I think. So yeah, in terms of the defence, I think Peter Keane is going away from that. Whether against Dublin they might have something up their sleeves, who knows? But I'm fascinated about how that game sets up if we get there. Now, there's obviously the All-Ireland semi-finals to come and Dublin Kildare this weekend, which we'll get to, but I can see Peter Keane just going all out attacking football, and not because I want to see that. I do think it's the only way Kerry can go play, and at the moment, the way they're playing, Kerry can go 10 minutes, have a bad first quarter, and still blow teams out of the water. So there's no reason why they can't do that against a stronger team.
Well, just looking at that, Dan, I saw a tweet actually during the game. I think it was from Gerald Gilroy of Off the Ball, where it was the Conor Callahan, David Clifford debate, and then you have someone like Shawnee O'Shea, who could be maybe even the best of all three. I mean, he's someone who really has taken on the mantle. I think it's in a really important position in Kerry football. They talk about this position, different positions a lot, and how they're so important in different sports. But I definitely think the centre forward for Kerry has such a massive role. Certainly, if you look back on their teams over the years, the likes of Declan O'Sullivan, the Gooch Cooper times there as well. But in Shawnee O'Shea, Kerry really, they have they have a player where if David Clifford has an off day or someone marks David Clifford well, Clifford only kicked 1 point, none from play at the weekend.
Mm.
They have someone else who can step up. And in Shawnee O'Shea, they've one of the best finishers in the country.
Yeah, and I saw that tweet, and to be honest, it was sums up well. There probably is a three in David Clifford, Conor Callan, and in that debate where Sean O'Shea is the best of the lot. And one thing that strikes with Sean O'Shea, he's such a likable. Like again, Dad, like on some of the things he says about certain Kerry players down through the years, like Donnelly, Galvin, David Moore, and I won't say what he says about them, but he wouldn't particularly take a liking to them. But he loves watching Sean O'Shea, and he kind of made a remark to me saying he's such a hard player not to like, which is a weird kind of thing where you have an opposition player that everyone kind of likes. Like, I think David Clifford's enough kind of haters out there, he might do something off the ball or something, nothing major, but something that that's enough for me now to get my teeth into, and I won't be clapping any of his scores, even if it's amazing. Where Sean O'Shea is just, I think there's something about him. He just does everything right. There's nothing flashy about him. He can kick 45s. He can kick it out of the hands from free, and his general play is amazing. And he just pops up with vital scores. And that number 11 role, like you said, Sean, yeah, he probably is as key a player for Kerry as ever. Like, if David Clifford has a quiet game like yesterday, you have other players to come into it. But if Sean O'Shea has a quiet game in terms of getting on ball and popping up with scores, Kerry might struggle. Absolutely. The one key player, and it's been said in a lot of places, is Paddy Clifford. Like, how long is it taking to unearth him? Almost like just as good as his brother. Like, and already a Football of the Year contender. So I saw some other podcasts liking him to Paul Galvin. I thought that was a great shout in terms of the way he gets on it. But he got on so much ball, and he got on a lot of ball when Kerry were losing as well. Which is, I was like, right, Jesus, who's going to be the leader here? And it seemed that David Clifford was nowhere to be seen, which in fairness, he was well marked. So Paddy Clifford was getting on balls, looking for passes. So that key half forward line, like Paddy Clifford comes out a bit, Sean O'Shea, the best thing that Kerry forward line, they link all over the place. But absolutely, you can make the argument that Sean O'Shea, he just does everything right so well, and he'd get in any team in the country. You build every team should build your team around him. But yeah, for me, Sean O'Shea, he was incredible without even doing anything out of the ordinary. He was just so good. I think, I always say some players that give you a 7 out of 10 every day. I just think Sean O'Shea, he always gives you an 8 out of 10, which is amazing. And he's just so consistent. So yeah, between him, Paddy Clifford, the Paul Gainey, didn't even have an amazing game the last day. They've just such a Richard Spillane to come on, Tommy Walsh to come on, loads of other Kerry forwards I'm probably missing as well. It's exciting to watch, and Sean O'Shea is right in the middle of it. Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's something to keep an eye on, the Kerry number 11 jersey. I suppose we're getting a lot of comments in here. We've got Brian Darlin, good fan of the podcast, saying Tyrone, the value for me, 13-2. Obviously, they might cause an upset against Kerry if they are to beat Monaghan at the weekend. John McMahon here saying the bookies shouldn't be writing off Dublin. Obviously, they'll have a big say yet. Unfortunately, Tyrone too. The Dubs up against Kildare.
But just on Tyrone, Sean, like you said, they've got to beat Monaghan, and while I think Tyrone, I'd be fairly sure they put up a better fight against Kerry than Monaghan. It's a quirk in Gaelic football where teams just can't get over the line to get there. Like Kerry against Cork last year, that's an extreme example, but I'm talking about a Mayo might have beaten Dublin at years, but they couldn't get by a Kerry in the semi-final or whatever, And for Tyrone, there's no bigger game than that Monaghan game, and that's going to be in Croke Park on a Saturday. There's no way that game's not going to be a one-score game. It just has that vibe to it, and I could really see them getting unstuck against Monaghan. I really think Monaghan have a right chance, but. So I wouldn't be getting stuck in Tyrone now, but geez, I'd look at their price maybe on the day to possibly upset Kerry or get close. But I do think, I said at the start of the year, there might be a small bit of stubbornness in me not to ignore the new evidence, but I wasn't overly impressed with Tyrone against Donegal. I thought Donegal, if they go 5 points up and Michael Murphy scores that penalty, I can't see Tyrone coming back and winning it, to be honest with you. So I just think Tyrone are a bit off. Whereas a new management team gone in and really changed the whole style of a county to go on winning All-Ireland in the year one, it's very, very rare, isn't it, in Gaelic football in particular. So I'm not thinking Tyrone are going to win an All-Ireland this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they got unstuck against Monaghan, but if they got the same one against Kerry, I'd still fancy Kerry to come through. I do think Dublin and Kerry are a small bit ahead still. I think the Dublin Mayo game might possibly be closer, but just something about Tyrone I'm not quite stuck on yet. Although if Colin McShane, etc., comes into form, who knows? Absolutely, they do have the firepower there.
We're going to look at the other provincial football final at the weekend. Mayo beating Galway by 6 points in Croke Park. It was weird actually. I was driving in somewhere, and me and my dad were there, and he noticed the Mayo flag or colours on the way in, and it kind of had to do a click myself that the kind of final was being played in Croke Park, obviously, but big win for Mayo. It's funny how when Mayo have needed to win Connacht to get through to keep themselves alive in the All Ireland series, they've done it the last 2 years. Obviously, getting to the All Ireland final last year. So it's a weird thing with Mayo. They kind of love the qualifiers, but when they have to have won their provincial, they've done it the last couple of years.
Yeah, like a lot of people are saying it's Mayo's first trophy in Croke Park since 1951. They did win the National League though,
National
didn't
League,
they?
yeah.
So that's been gone around a little bit, but that's not true. But I guess their first championship trophy, absolutely. But I didn't even find that out I saw the tweet and I agreed with the fair play, and I was looking at an image for this podcast, and then an image came up. I was looking for Aidan O'Shea Croke Park, and one of them was him holding the Allianz National League or Canadian. Anyway, I was just like, well, that's sorted anyway. But just to put that out there. But yeah, and we talked about this so many times, Sean, getting teams playing too many games in Croke Park, all that goes out the window with COVID. And the fact that you had 18,000 fans there was incredible. It really was. Like, it felt like I was a bit jealous myself. I was half thinking of going in with our game. I found I was, we watched the atmosphere coming through in the telly. The second half, that third quarter was great atmosphere. Like, and you just remember how good Mayo fans are. Like before I talk about the game, like one of my memories of watching Dublin games is being in Hill 16, looking out at Dublin Mayo and Ireland final and going, Jesus, Mayo outnumbered the Dubs there 2-1 in the seats. Good job we have the Hill, like, do you know what I mean? And you just look at all these pockets of Mayo fans screaming. They're actually mad. Like, it's just such a good atmosphere before, during, and after games against them. And it was the same the last day. And Galway fans aren't bad either, in fairness. Like, and it was just the teams don't like each other. It's a great atmosphere. But yeah, like I did quietly fancy Galway in the match based on, I don't know why, I just thought they had a lot of better preparation in terms of the test they were getting going into the game. Mayo could possibly gone in cold Division 2 and get a win against Leitrim, wasn't it? And Sligo, and for Galway to kind of have that tough enough game against Roscommon, a tough enough game against Monaghan in the league as well, that they lost. They would have learned a lot. And first half, like, they were the better team, like, and Shane Walsh was absolutely incredible. Like, that run, I watched it again today, it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. The way he solos it on the left foot, but his right foot's as good as ever. It's incredible. Himself and Damon Comer were fantastic, and Shane Walsh, he actually landed on his shoulder right before half time, and I know Pork Joyce wasn't too happy with some off the ball incident, but I think he had to get injections at half time, and he wasn't the same player. Like, I think one of Mayo's scores, he was like the last man, so it just showed you he was all over the place second half. But your Pork Joyce, you can't take him off. Like, you just can't if he's anyway. And it was a pity, and like, Galway didn't score until the 61st minute in the second half, which just shows you what an incredible comeback. You just wouldn't have seen it coming at half time, where, like, I did think Mayo would come back into it. I just thought Galway they fell to pieces, and you have to be disappointed with them post COVID, like the way they've come back. They haven't lost, or they haven't won. The only team they've beaten, I think, is Roscommon in 2 years. Like, it's incredible. And you do have to kind of ask questions of Pork Joyce. Well, let's stick with them for this year and get a full league campaign next year and a full Super 8 series. Like, they're just not developing quickly enough because they don't have the games. And Mayo's experience in Croke Park, the Croke Park factor, which everyone was talking about before the game, and I thought was over-egged a bit, turned out to be completely true, which is fair play. Like, so it just shows you Mayo and Croke Park are a different animal. The way they run on the ball, they always had two options in the second half, where it just seemed sometimes they were running down blind alleys in the first half. So yeah, you've got to be impressed. Like, some of the names are written down here, like Ryan O'Donoghue was amazing, Matthew Moran was amazing, like Oisin Mullen at 6. There was some great tackling Aidan O'Shea in the first half, Horror in the second half. His tackle, it was just amazing tackle. I've never really seen those kind of tackles where you go in with one hand and you're pushing it out with the other hand. The one on Shane Walsh, Aidan O'Shea in particular, was amazing. So very impressed with Mayo's second half. Questions have to be asked of why they weren't up for the game in the first half, but they were very impressive. And the Croke Park factor, like, we're used to watching Cont games, Sean, like the Galway Roscommon game, wind and rain.
Bad weather.
Yeah, it's not a great watch, is it? But the Croke Park factor, and it was obviously sunny. It was a brilliant occasion. It was, and we've missed fans in all seriousness on a wider point, and that's the most important thing. But yeah, Mayo, they were very impressive. They were very impressive, and they'll give Dublin a good test, I presume, in the semi-final.
Yeah, I think the key there is down just looking at him at Rowan, 1-2 from play, Conor Loftus 2 points in play from midfield, which is massive because Mayo, it's pretty well known, have had a major reliance on the likes of Killian O'Connor to get scores. And I think it's very important if Matt Rowan and Conor Loftus, who kind of broke through as this pacey inside forward who came almost like a super sub, and now he's kind of found himself out in the middle of the field. Obviously, Mayo need to find a replacement for the likes of Shane O'Shea and Tom Parsons, and it looks at the moment like they might have done that. Let's, I suppose, look ahead to the weekend, two provincial finals as well. I think we got a comment in here from Diarmaid McCabe. He said Dublin being doubted far too early now. This is the time to back them. They'll beat Kildare by about 10 points, in his opinion, and play averagely against Mayo and beat them by 4 or 5. I think the thing with Dublin is a lot of the Cluxton thing hasn't really been quashed enough yet. And having speaking to a couple of people, they just seem a little bit disenfranchised with the Dubs at the moment. Maybe it's because they haven't been able to go to games, haven't been able to go to their National League games in the build up. But a lot of people just feel like there's under Desi Farrell, they mightn't like the regime as much as Jim Gavin, and everything under Gilroy and Gavin was almost regimented and everything was perfect and put in place. And under Desi Farrell, there's been a few cracks, and all of a sudden, Dublin, where they are still the reigning 6-time All Ireland champions, and they are one of the favourites to lift the Sam Maguire this year, but everything just doesn't seem to be rosy, and potentially Kildare could at least put it up to Dublin for some amount of it.
Yeah, like who would have thought going into Leinster final, like you think Kildare would give Dublin a bit of a game, and as Dublin fan, you'd always go in hoping for a bit of a game. Like at the end of the day, it isn't entertainment more first and foremost, especially when you're spending that kind of money going in to watch a game. Whereas I'd expect Kildare to at least put it up to Dublin. Like I think that it's the wrong opponent. Like I don't think Kildare have the firepower. Like I think maybe Meath in the Leinster final. If Meath had another crack at Dublin now, they might, find a way to stick with them. One or two things didn't go their way in the first half, and they left themselves too much to do. Whereas Kildare, they limped over the line against Offaly. They were okay against Westmeath. Like it was a good game, great game of football. But like the standard, like you do think Dublin are on another level. And I'd agree with Diarmaid in the first, but I do expect Dublin to beat Kildare. I expect them to come up with some sort of response. Like that third quarter against Meath is obviously atrocious, and yeah, I'd be very I'd be serious questions, like you said, on the regime and what's going on there. Like I have heard from a few people that Desi Farrell, he's the kind of manager they either love him or hate him, and most people seem to have loved him in the underage structure, but obviously something's missing in the senior structure, and whether it was the COVID lockdown training, which if you think about it, it doesn't seem like a big deal now, but at the time it was a huge deal. And if someone again, these are only rumors, but if someone like Stephen Cluxton wasn't overly happy with that or wasn't told about that training, you can see why he'd be fuming. But they have so much experience there, so many good players, Dublin, and you'd expect some sort of response, or you'd expect Desi to find a way to come up with it. The question marks of Desi, there was no way Paul Mannion and Brian Howard shouldn't have started that All-Ireland final last year. And you never hear that talk after a win, but a lot of people were saying it was a bit weird. Brian Howard, he is, one of Dublin's main players, so he wasn't starting. Yeah, and it just, and Dublin won, and they had enough to get over the line. And the more you look at last year, you're starting to look. I got vibes of Pat O'Shea's All-Ireland win in 2007 when he took over the job, and it seemed like a soft All-Ireland, beating Cork in the final. Dublin's draw, you can't argue it, like Cavan and then beating Mayo with James Horan's first year back. You can't argue that's a soft All-Ireland. You just can't. Whether Dublin win it this year or not, you can't argue that was a soft All-Ireland. People were saying at the time, even more so now. Look at where Cavan have gone. Mayo have obviously grown, but they got relegated in Division 2. It'd be interesting that the All-Ireland semi-final, where I'd had a few weeks ago, Dublin would beat Mayo handy. I do expect it to be closer. I still think Dublin, don't get me wrong, I think it'll be a Dublin-Kerry final, like I've said earlier in the podcast. I just think that, you could get at this Dublin team a little bit more. And it just seemed like before, you'd watch a Dublin game and you'd see, a team would get a couple of chances, and you'd oh, geez, I've told you now, this Dublin team, you can get at them. And next thing they win 6 All-Irelands in a row, where it seemed against Meath and even Wexford, the teams are getting more chances. And it's worrying, and it's not a switch. It's not a switch. You can't just flick a switch and you're just going to get the best Dublin team back. So I think that Dublin team's probably peaked. Whether they get new players in the next couple of years, it doesn't mean, maybe people are writing them off, doesn't mean they can't win an All-Ireland. And if it is a Dublin-Kerry final, who knows? But in terms of the game on Sunday, Jack O'Connor, Kildare, if you look at their season on paper, they're back in Division 1 now, aren't they? And then they're also Leinster final. It's a success, but they kind of limped over the line a small bit. I think they beat Meath. I think Meath were a better team in the league, and against not impressed me in the championship. So probably wrong opponents. I expect them to get through, hoping for a good game. But yeah, I wouldn't say anyone's writing Dublin off. I personally think they'll be an All-Ireland final. I just think Kerry will have too much for them this year. I said at the start, and I'd probably stick with that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Mayo put it up to them. Like, again, the build up to that Dublin Mayo semi-final will be great, I guess. I know we had a comment earlier saying GA's gone a bit flat, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But probably a discussion for another day, Sean. We definitely need to have that pod soon in terms of restructuring. All right.
Yeah, get your comments into us. Jeremy McCabe here. Still have the likes of McCarthy, Fenton, Kilkenny, Con, Mick Fitz. Great to the game. Meath played out of their skin the second half, and the Dubs are still poor and won by 6. And he also added Kerry with quality on Sunday, but that full back line was exposed. Brian Hurley had Jason Foley and bits.
True.
Obviously, the other one is Monaghan Tyrone. We spoke briefly on that. I want to have a quick word on the hurling. The senior hurling quarter-final draw in the men's was made. Tipperary, who lost the final to Limerick, and Munster final will play Waterford, who had a good win over Galway, and the Dubs will play Cork. And Dublin obviously losing to Kenny in the Leinster final by a good bit. I suppose we'll have a quick word on Waterford Galway.
Yeah.
For anyone following the game, I suppose, not watching it seemed like a bonkers finish to the game. The game actually had a lot. Having watched it back, that's one of the only games I did watch back this weekend. Having not watched a lot, it felt like poor Sean Stack, the Dublin referee, almost was in a difficult position. And it was one of those games where it's one of the first GA games I watched in a while where it was like, just the crowd really had an effect on that. There was a couple of frees where the Waterford fans were going mad. And obviously, it added to it massively. But it was just, it felt like a proper championship game, that did. And it's so often we watch games without fans this year not feel like one, but that certainly did feel like a proper knockout game.
Yeah, and considering we're only talking a couple of thousand, it's amazing the atmosphere it generated. I just think those Waterford fans are another category of bonkers fans in the nicest way possible. They're so loud and so passionate. And I used to work with a Waterford man, and I'm a referee myself. Trying to talk refereeing to him, it just wasn't going through at all. And I wonder, is that across the board with Waterford in general? Like Sean Stack, I kind of know him through Dublin refereeing circles. It's a massive game for him, and I have so much sympathy for him for that red card, because it's happened right before the final whistle. He hasn't seen it, and he's blown for half time. Everyone's off the pitch. He's talked to his umpires. They've said it's a red card, which we'll get on to Darren McGrath's comments in a second, but it was 100% a red card. He can't go into the dressing room and give a red card. He's got to wait till the teams are back out. And I don't think you can do this in other sports, but in Gaelic, in GA, he's 100% correct by rule that you can still send a player off before the game resumes. And if that includes a halftime break, then you're fully entitled to send a red card. But imagine you saw the reaction of the Waterford management, the Waterford subs, and the Waterford fans. And it is bonkers. You've had nearly, and GA half times are sometimes nearly 20 minutes these days, like that, which is another topic. So they come back on, and he gives a red card. Like, you've already got all the players in ready to go. It's a disaster. But Sean had no other option but to do that. It was just like, talk about your biggest game, and that to happen for you. It's so unfortunate for him. But so I have huge sympathy for him. And I've sympathy with him because he made the right decision. No one saw it, so he's going to get abused for the second half. And you people like Derek McGrath, who's a Waterford man, went full Kieran Whelan and decided to say, oh, he flicked him. Like, in all fairness, like Donald Logue was saying, he didn't flick him. Like, the flick, that's a flick. He went fully stroke him, and Donald Logue said, forget about rules. That's no place in the game. And he's fully correct. Like, you can't go around striking people. But whatever about that, and that happens in the heat of the moment, for Derek McGrath to sit on the Sunday game and say, that's not a red card. It's completely unfair on not just Sean and his match officials, but the game in general. And he's a Waterford man, and the way he was talking, it went up. He lost the head, I think, by the end. If you haven't watched the Sunday game, watch it back, because by the end of it, he was just talking about Waterford winning the All-Ireland all of a sudden. Like, he lost the run of himself in Waterford's victory. But joking aside, it is kind of funny in the Sunday game. You shouldn't take it too serious, but it's not fair on match officials if you've got a Waterford man going on the Sunday game and saying that wasn't a red card, where it's 100%er. And it was the correct decision. Sean was unfortunate. The game's lost. Like, I've refereed games where I've lost control of the game from a couple of decisions I let go, and I've also lost control of games where it wasn't really my fault. Do you know what I mean? And this was one where Sean couldn't have done anything. Now, a few decisions, like every other one, could have gone ways. I know Waterford were particularly unhappy with a line ball that Joe Canning seemed to convince the ref. And a lot of comments saying, it's kind of funny in fairness, saying, I read a few comments saying, Sean, he kind of, his eyes are drawn to Joe Canning, and Joe Canning says it's a line ball, it's a line ball. So, yeah, I don't know about that, to be fair. Like, I again, referees don't see that. Like, you have to kind of ref to understand that. But he was so unfortunate with that decision. There's nothing he can do. The game's alive. The fans are going wild. But in saying all that, leaving referees' decisions apart, I do think it was a brilliant game. It was some comeback from Galway. Part of me was really hoping Galway didn't do it for Sean's sake and a few others, and the safety of match officials, etc. But Galway were terrible first half. First 3 quarters, really. They were 15 points down, and they managed to get it back. And this is even after the red card. And Joe Canning's pass for the goal was sensational. They got it back to 4. But yeah, Waterford deserved winners. It'll be interesting against Tip. I do think Tip will have too much for them. I was overall impressed with them against Limerick for that first half, and I do think they bring that level of play. I do think they're a little bit above Waterford, and yeah, it'll be interesting. Be a big game, and that's on RTE. That's the 1:30 game, I think, and then the Ulster final is on at 4:00, and Cork Clare, and I do want to give this a quick message. Sorry, Cork beat Clare, obviously. That game was on Sky Sports, and Cork's quarterfinal against Dublin will be on Sky Sports. And doing a bit of digging, their last 6 championship games have been on Sky Sports, and they haven't had a game on RT since the quarterfinal against Kilkenny in 2019, which is just not right. And there should be, like, Wooly did a bit of digging on GAO a few years ago. They're not getting a whole pile of money for these games to be on Sky Sports. Yeah. They're not getting millions and millions and millions. And for Cork fans to be denied the opportunity to watch 6 championship games in a row, there has to be some sort of rule in there to stop that happening. Or even, like, this was all over Twitter about the 5 in a row before. Someone should add a word saying, put the Tip game, no quarterfinal should be on Sky. That's another matter. The fact that the contract says it is, the Tip Waterford game should have been on Sky, and they should have done something about it. So it needs to be called out, because, like, we're not talking about the Premier League here. This is an amateur sport. It's different. Joe Brody maybe goes overboard as having that community side of things, but he is completely right, and he does have a point. And I watch games at Sky Sports. It doesn't feel right. The Sky coverage itself is fantastic. It's arguably better than RTE. But there's nothing better than sitting and watching RT. All the country's watching it. Like, I watched the hurling on Saturday going, nobody's watching this. The Twitter, there's not as many tweets about it. Matches on RT, everyone's watching it. You've no other option but to watch it. So just a shout out. I think it's very harsh. And we spent a bit of time in Cork when we were young, Sean, and especially in East Cork in particular. It's a massive hurling. They don't care about football, And for them, like, a lot of places wouldn't have Sky. A lot of pubs wouldn't have had Sky. So, yeah, I know you can get it on Mayo TV and I just don't think it's right. It doesn't sit right with me, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't say deny Sky coverage. I'd just say be a bit more smarter about it and cut off your All-Ireland quarterfinals, or have them on RT and Sky. I'm sure there's a deal that the GA could do, or I don't know. But yeah, it's unfair. 6 games in a row and no games since 2 years on RT. It's a bit of a farce, really.
Yeah, it is one of them. Look, I think it's well known. A lot of people's takes, and I'd agree with you. I'm not a massive fan of it on it. It'd be interesting to see. I think that the deal contract or whatever comes up in a couple of years. It'd be interesting to see what happens, what line the GA take. It does feel like a more progressive GA with Larry McCarthy on board, as opposed to maybe someone like John Horan. I think the GA is set for widespread change, and I do think there could be a place for Sky Sports in the new structures, or the potential new structures with more games. But definitely, I agree with an All-Ireland quarterfinal, and particularly in a year of COVID where you can't get to a game, or there's a limited tickets capacity or whatever. I think it's very important that something is done about that.
Yeah, and just final thing on that, Sean, like, it just frustrates me because, like, as far as I remember, and if anyone in the comments can correct me, or someone after the podcast, as far as I remember, the hurling quarterfinals were circled for RTE in the existing contract, but because of COVID, they had a good few Super 8 games taken away from Sky, so they obviously came to the table and said, can we have a hurling quarterfinal? I think that should have been given to Sky, but also given to RTE. Do you know what I mean? And people always say, we weren't showing these games before on RT, and, like, you would have been shown a hurling quarterfinal. Let's be fair, this was on RT. They actually have a gap in the schedule where they could show this before Tokyo or whatever. So Yeah, I think it's not just the current contract, it's the adapted contract to COVID. I could be wrong on that, but as far as I remember, there was no hurling quarterfinal. They had a football quarterfinal or then Super 8s. And again, as Wooly's done the numbers on it, if you go and listen to one of his podcasts, they're getting absolutely nothing for it as well. So, milk Sky for a lot of money, put it back into grassroots, show us where the money's going. But I don't know, it doesn't. I didn't even think of the pandemic at the moment, the fact restricted crowds and people can't get to games and they can't watch the match. So it's a bit shitty, really, for the GA.
And then I think if you're someone, for example, who's had to pay more for an All Ireland final, I think the tickets have gone up to 90 from 80. It does beggar a few questions. And it is certainly a topic for another debate. That's all the GA coverage we're going to have. I suppose the Olympics has started. It feels weird because it's always with the Olympics. It does feel like it's on at obviously bar London 2012, but it always feels like it's on at some unearthly hour. But the other night, I watched a bit of the triathlon. I watched a bit of the swimming. It's great to have the Olympic because it's what you'd know, what you've grown up with. The crowd aspect of it and what's happening over in Tokyo, and the idea that the public and the people of Tokyo are probably being left behind with this, with the games taking place, doesn't maybe sit well. But I suppose that is modern day, not only sport but modern day society. But there has been a couple of interesting stories for the Irish. There's a lot to happen in the next few weeks. I suppose before we get into it, we'll have to give a massive shout out to Leona Maguire. Shot a 61. New record low for a round in a women's major championship and a men's major championship as well. Fabulous round, finished tied 6th at the Evian, the final major of the year. She is obviously trending in the upward direction, probably an outside pick for the Solheim Cup. Be interesting to see what happens there. But looking ahead to the Olympics, and obviously Ireland will have a hope on a medal in the golf. You've picked out a couple of stories, Dan, particularly in the swimming.
Yeah, well, it was absolutely incredible. I didn't stay up for this because it was at 2 or 3 a.m. But for those listening on the pod, this would have been on Monday. We're filming on Monday night. This is gonna be Tuesday morning. Mona McSherry getting to the final of the 100 meters breaststroke, is absolutely incredible. And watching her semi-final back the morning after, just seeing, because I went on Twitter and the first 10 tweets are about it. Okay, I need to see this. It was an incredible swim, and geez, I'd have high hopes of her maybe getting somewhere in, I don't think she'll get a medal, but maybe, looking at a few of the numbers, maybe get 5th or 6th, which even 8th, she's already got 8th guaranteed. She just needs to turn up. It's absolutely incredible. And just even seeing the way they started, and she was the last person to go down, and then in her interview after, she was saying her mind hasn't processed what's happening, but her body, so it's just like a normal event for her, but her body, it kind of knows something's going on. And she said that after, and I think looking back in the highlights and seeing that she was the last person to go down suggests that maybe that, she just needed that extra second. And it's just such a human element of it. And I never thought that your mind could be so focused, but your body's just shaking with excitement. And it's just amazing. She was the world junior champion in 2017. And I kind of heard about that at the time, and I remember getting really excited. And then everything with the Olympics, you kind of forget about it till the Olympics comes around. And obviously this extra year, it's probably been a godsend to her to give her that extra year experience. And maybe in Paris, she could possibly, go for a medal, which would be amazing. But just to get to a final, and everyone in Sligo is going to be up watching it tonight. I think the pool that she swims in is going to have the lights on. It's amazing. I think the finals at 2 or 3 in the morning. I haven't looked at the time yet, but I think I'm going to commit to watching it live. If not, as soon as I get up, not look at the results, have it recorded. But yeah, it's amazing. Funny enough, when you said the Olympic triathlon, it's something I watched the start of and then watched the highlights today. And your man Kristen Blumfeld, he's from Norway. He was amazing. I don't know if you watched the finish to it, but he went off with over a kilometer to go. And a lot of people, if you're listening, you'd have got into lockdown running. So I was like, right, they're kilometer, he's going to go for the sprint. And I was like, Jesus, you're not going to make it home. And if you see his physique, it's a little bit more heavier than the others. He had a British guy out behind him. And you're thinking, there's no way. He's gone way too early. The commentator's like, he's gone way too early. And then it kind of cut a few seconds because it was highlights and he's miles clear. And this guy was gone at the finish line. But his celebration was amazing. It just shows you what the Olympics means. And I was a bit unsure going into the Olympics, a bit like the Euros, a bit like the Premier League, behind closed door aspect of it, all that jazz. But seeing these athletes celebrate something they worked so hard for, like there should be everything possible to get this on, which there has been. And you mentioned the lack of crowds. Obviously, with the Olympic triathlon, it was on the streets of Tokyo, so there were so many fans out there. They can't barricade, and it was amazing seeing the fans there. And I don't know the COVID situation. You know, if COVID muted on Twitter, for example, I try and stay out of the COVID news, but you do think surely you can get 500 to 1,000 people in each of these stadiums. But there is a small bit of atmosphere because other athletes are allowed to wander around, you know, coaches and all that. And you saw the celebration of the Aussie coach. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter, taking the mask off, which you obviously shouldn't be doing. But it's amazing. There's nothing better than the Olympics, and you forget about it until the Olympics is on every 4 years. So it's amazing how this has been on. We've loads of medal contenders coming up. Like, I'm sure everyone's seen Paula Donovan's interview by now. He's just honestly one of the funniest guys you meet. Like, the way he talks, you're already laughing. Like, do you know what I mean? And he's trying to get you to laugh. Oh, you should be going to bed. Like, it's just amazing. It's been some incredible interviews with athletes, Irish athletes in particular. Like the taekwondo guy, there was a lot of other stuff. It just seems that it's been heartbreak at the moment, and hopefully going forward we'll have a couple of medals to celebrate. Like, I think we're predicted to have 6, none so far, but high hopes that we'll have a few. And even the golf, we could sneak one with Leona or Shane, or indeed Rory McIlroy as well.
Yeah, I think you've named off a couple. I think Rowan is a massive avenue for us. It was brilliant to see the women hockey team with their first game. They lost obviously to the World Cup champions, the Dutch. I think it was today. So there is a lot going on. Obviously, athletics later on in the Olympics. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's something we'll try and cover as best we can.
And just to say for anyone, if they want to watch the Olympics, just follow Team Ireland on Twitter. They tweet out the schedule every night, and you kind of look at it going, all right, I won't. This is not the night for me. Or other nights, Jesus, you'd be tempted to get up. So just for anyone who wants to watch gold medal action, or it's actually brilliant account. Team Ireland is the official account, and it's brilliant for just showing the schedule because, like you said, you can get lost in it. There's so many events, but RT are covering it pretty well, in fairness to them.
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting to see. And I suppose with the Olympics, it's a part of history. But I also think with the extra year for some of these athletes, it's just extra drama and extra storyline, especially in the swimming. Already a couple of big shocks. But that's all from us this week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your comments. It was brilliant. Helps add to the show greatly, and we're looking forward to hearing more from people in the next few weeks and keeping an eye certainly on the Olympics. Dan, thanks for joining me.
No worries.
Remember to get us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and get in touch with us. We're running a lot of fan stories at the moment, so if you want to talk about any sport in particular, or football, or any sort of idea, a club or a community, say for example, you connect with, get in touch with us, and we'll happily have you on the podcast over the next few weeks. And we'll be certainly looking ahead to the GA season and also to the Olympics, and hopefully Ireland could pick up a couple of medals in the next few weeks. But that's all from us here at the Tackle and Sport Podcast. Thanks for listening, and take it easy.